The card game was going well until the distress signal arrived. I had 3 aces and a pair of 7s, the best hand I had seen all week. Gecko was about to lose his last protein bar, and Tanaka was already reaching across the table to claim what she thought would be her winnings. Then the alarm went off. Not a loud, dramatic alarm, just a soft 3-tone chime that the Mjolnir used when command had something important to say. We all looked up at the same time. Nobody moved. The cards stayed on the table. Vasquez, Captain Odiambo's voice came through the intercom, calm as always. Get your squad to the briefing room. I set my cards face down and stood. Gecko groaned. Tanaka pocketed her winnings anyway, because she was Tanaka, and that was simply who she was as a person. Bonesaw had already stood up before the captain finished speaking, because Bonesaw could read a room better than anyone I had ever met, and this room had just changed entirely. We floated down the corridor in the low gravity of the ship's middle section, pulling ourselves along the handles mounted on the walls. The Mjolnir was not a beautiful ship. It was old, retrofitted from a cargo hauler into something that could carry 12 soldiers across the galaxy and keep them alive doing it. The walls were scratched, the lights buzzed in 2 of the corridors. The coffee machine in the common area had not worked in 6 months. But it was ours, and I trusted it the way you trust something that has not failed you yet. The briefing room was small. We squeezed in, all 12 of us, and Captain Odiambo put the holographic display on the table. A space station appeared, turning slowly above a massive orange-brown gas giant. The station looked like something grown from glass and coral. Smooth curves, extended arms, observation domes that caught the light. It was beautiful, and it was in serious trouble. Keth Voss Station, Odiambo said. Civilian research facility. 600 residents, from over 30 species. Galactic Union registered and protected. He paused. As of 18 hours ago, it was seized by armed members of the Vreth Compact. I had heard of the Vreth. Most soldiers who operated in this region of the galaxy had. They were a large species. Crystalline exoskeletons. 4 arms, thick and dense and hard to put down. The Compact was their military-political faction, and they had strong opinions about which species deserved rights and which ones deserved to serve. Soft-fleshed species, meaning anything without a hard outer shell, were in their second category. They did not hide this view. The Galactic Union cannot send their own forces, Odiambo continued. A military response from the GU would formally trigger a system-wide conflict. Politically, they cannot move. He looked around the table. They have asked for third-party intervention. Third party meaning us, Gecko said. Third party meaning us. There was a pause. Tanaka studied the holographic station with her arms crossed. Bonesaw was reading the attached data file on his tablet, already skipping ahead to the medical notes the way he always did. The rest of the squad were quiet, which meant they were thinking, which was all I ever asked of them. Then the communication channel opened and a new face appeared. Tall, green-gray, with compound eyes, and the long folded limbs of a Lithani elder. Ambassador Tirith Sek of the Galactic Union. He looked at us the way you might look at a tool you were not sure would work but had no choice but to try. We require intervention from a non-aligned party, Tirith Sek said. His translated voice was careful and precise. A party that is resilient. The station's internal gravity systems are severely damaged. They fluctuate between low and high levels without warning. Our standard rescue teams cannot operate under those conditions. The atmosphere inside several sections is partially compromised. There are chemical agents the Vreth have deployed. A long pause. We understand that humans are available. Available, Gecko repeated, very quietly, to nobody in particular. I looked at Captain Odiambo. He nodded once. I looked back at the ambassador's face on the screen. We'll take the mission, I said. Tirith Sek's mandibles moved in a way I could not read. You understand the conditions. We do. You understand that the gravity fluctuations alone have been assessed as unsurvivable for most known rescue configurations. Ambassador, I said. I grew up in Caracas. My squad mate Gecko grew up climbing cliff faces without equipment. Tanaka can hold her breath for 9 minutes. Bonesaw once performed field surgery on himself during a training accident because the medic was busy. I leaned forward slightly. Unsurvivable is a strong word. We prefer to use the word challenging. There was silence on the other end. Then Tirith Sek said, We will transmit full mission coordinates. May your people be adequate. The channel closed. Adequate, Tanaka said. I love that word. We had 4 hours before insertion. I spent the first hour in the equipment bay, checking gear and thinking. The data file Odiambo had given us contained a full Galactic Union threat assessment of Vreth soldiers. I read it carefully. Armored exoskeleton rated at high resistance. Average mass of 220 kilograms. 4 articulated combat limbs. Atmospheric toxin glands capable of releasing nerve compounds lethal to most carbon-based organisms. Their home atmosphere was rated Category 2 hostile by GU environmental standards. Category 2 hostile. I almost smiled. Earth's atmosphere, according to the same GU classification system, was Category 4 hostile. High oxygen content, practically combustible. Biological pathogens in the air, the water, the soil. Temperature swings that could freeze you solid or cook you in the same week, depending on where you stood. Megafauna across 6 of 7 continents that had evolved specifically to hunt and consume other organisms, including the medium-sized ones who eventually decided to build cities and call themselves civilized. The Galactic Union had catalogued Earth 60 years ago and quietly flagged it in their database as a world to avoid. We grew up there. We called it home. I walked down the row of my squad and felt the familiar quiet confidence that comes not from arrogance but from knowledge. Gecko, real name Kwame Osei, had grown up on the coast of Ghana, where he spent his childhood scaling cliffs that experienced climbers refused to approach. His hands were like something carved from old wood. He understood gravity the way musicians understand rhythm, instinctively, from the inside. When the station's system sent the floor to 2.1 times standard Earth gravity, Gecko would bend his knees, widen his stance, and keep moving. It would be hard. Hard was not new. Tanaka Yuki had been a competitive freediver before the military. Her lungs were trained to survive on a single breath for extraordinary lengths of time. More importantly, she had spent years learning to stay calm when her body screamed at her to panic, when every instinct said she was drowning and she chose, every time, not to believe it. That kind of calm does not come from a laboratory. It comes from practice. Bonesaw, Master Sergeant Carmen Reyes, had a medical degree and had practiced trauma surgery in 3 different conflict zones on Earth before she ever left the planet. Earth's wildlife and Earth's various human conflicts had, for generations, given doctors an endless supply of creative injuries to learn from. The GU's medical corps was excellent at treating the species they had always treated. Bonesaw could improvise a treatment for something she had never seen before and have a reasonable chance of keeping it alive, because Earth had been giving doctors impossible problems for so long that improvisation was simply part of the curriculum. The rest of the squad had their own versions of the same story. Every one of them came from a world that had never made survival easy. What the Galactic Union read as a warning label, we had lived as an education. We geared up without powered armor. The corridors of Kethvos Station were irregular and tight, and the fluctuating gravity would make armored suits more dangerous than helpful. We went in with ballistic-resistant weave, sealed respiratory gear, magnetic boots for low-gravity sections, and the basic equipment of people who had learned not to rely on things that might break. The drop pod entry was rough. It always is. We came in through the station's lower cargo bay at speed, and right as we crossed the threshold, the gravity generator spiked. The inside of the pod went from manageable to crushing in about 2 seconds. I felt the weight come down on me like something solid and mean, and I felt my vision start to narrow at the edges. I woke up 3 seconds later on the floor of the airlock. I stood up. Gecko was already on one knee, pushing himself upright. I reached down and pulled him the rest of the way. Tanaka had braced herself against the wall on instinct and was already standing. Bonesaw had one hand on the wall and was checking his equipment with the other. One by one, everyone found their feet. "Everyone good?" I said. "Cracking," said Gecko. We moved. The inside of Kethvos Station was extraordinary, even in its damaged state. The architecture was alive in a way that human buildings were not. Corridors that curved like the inside of a shell. Walls that seemed to breathe with soft bioluminescent light. Rooms that opened into each other at angles that made no immediate sense until you understood the species that had designed them. Parts of the ceiling were shattered, and the debris floated in the low-gravity pockets between generator cycles. There was a faint smell in the air that my respirator filtered out before I could identify it. We found the first survivor inside a ventilation duct 10 meters from the airlock. It was a Lithani, one of the tall, spindly, 6-limbed beings I recognized from the ambassador's species. This one had folded itself into the duct with remarkable efficiency, pressing its long limbs close to its body, making itself as small as something that tall could make itself. Its large dark eyes found me in the dim light, and for a moment it simply stared at my face. Then something in it seemed to release, some enormous tension that had been held for a very long time, and it made a sound I did not have a word for in any language I spoke. It was something between relief and exhaustion. It pointed a trembling limb further down the corridor and held up what I counted as 7 fingers, or what functioned as fingers. 7 hostages in that direction. Alive. "We've got you," I told it. knowing it probably did not understand the words but hoping the tone was clear enough. Stay here. We'll come back. We moved toward the first checkpoint. The two Vreth sentries were exactly where the station blueprints predicted they would be, posted at the main corridor junction. Four-armed, standing very still in the way that large, confident beings stand when they believe nothing in their environment can threaten them. They were watching the corridor ahead. They were not watching the ceiling. They were not watching the grated floor panels beneath their feet. Gecko went up. Tanaka went under. I walked straight down the middle. This is not bravery. This is distraction work, the oldest tactic in the manual. While their eyes were on me, the ceiling became Gecko's domain, and the floor became Tanaka's. The Vreth species had evolved on a world with no significant aerial predators, and no burrowing threat. The concept of being approached simultaneously from 3 different vertical levels did not exist in their instinct library. By the time the first one began to process what was happening above and below, the engagement was already over. The taller one managed to grab my arm with one of its lower limbs. I noted that its grip was genuinely impressive. I also noted that I had been grabbed by things with impressive grip before, and I broke the hold the same way I had been taught on a planet where breaking holds was a survival skill people learned early. We restrained both of them and moved on. We cleared the first 3 sections in 40 minutes and collected 83 hostages. Beings of a dozen different species, some of them injured, all of them frightened. We directed them to a sealed compartment in the station's core and kept moving. I noticed, during these movements, that many of the rescued beings looked at my squad with an expression that I could not immediately name. It took me a moment to recognize it because I was not expecting it. They were afraid of us, not of the Vreth, of us. A small, quiet part of me understood why. We moved differently than anything they expected a rescue team to move like. We were too calm. We got up too fast after things knocked us down. We would deal with that impression later. First, the rest of the station. The comms channel crackled, and a new voice entered it, deeper than the translator usually handled, with a resonance that came from a large chest cavity and hard external structure. The Vreth commander. He identified himself as Deathworlders. You have entered restricted space, he said. Identify your species and your authority. Staff Sergeant Mara Vasquez, I said. Human, Earth. We're here for the hostages. A pause, a long one. We have records of your world, he said finally. Earth is classified as Category 4 environmental hostile. No known species claims origin there. One does, I said. We do. Another pause, then. You cannot survive this station's current conditions. We're doing all right so far. The channel went quiet for about 4 minutes. I spent that time clearing 2 more corridors. Then Deathworlders came back, and his tone had changed. He was no longer calm. He was not panicked either. He was the kind of controlled that comes from someone reassessing the situation and not liking what the reassessment showed. He deployed everything. 30 Vreth warriors. All of them. And the atmospheric canisters. Nerve compounds rated lethal to all Category 1 through 3 species. The canisters opened with a hiss we could hear from 2 corridors away. Masks, I said, already wearing mine. We had brought the masks from Earth. Military surplus, standard issue, designed for environments where the air had been made dangerous deliberately. Humans had been making each other's air dangerous for over 100 years. We had very good masks. The gravity spiked then, the generator cycling to its maximum. 2.1 times standard. The floor became heavy in an instant, and I heard the difference immediately. The sound of large, armored beings struggling. Crystalline exoskeletons designed for a 1.4 gravity world suddenly meeting 1.1 gravity above that, unsupported, bearing their own weight plus armor. 4 Vreth dropped to one knee. 2 more slowed almost to a stop. My squad bent their knees. We lowered our centers of gravity the way you learn to when you grow up walking on a world that has high gravity by galactic average. We moved slower than normal. We kept moving. Bonesaw took a crystal spine fragment in the shoulder during the worst of it, a piece of debris from a damaged section of wall that caught her at the wrong angle. I saw it happen and started toward her. She had already reached back with her free hand, wrapped her fingers around it, and pulled it out in one smooth motion. She wrapped it with a compression bandage from her chest pocket without breaking stride and kept running. Deathworlders' second in command, according to our intercepted channel feed, reportedly told him at this point, Commander, one of them was struck. It did not stop. I found Deathworlders in the station's command core. By then his forces had either been restrained or had withdrawn. He was alone, standing in the center of the room, and he was massive, almost twice my height. 4 arms extended slightly from his sides, crystal spines running along his back like a ridge of sharp mountains. He was looking at me with something I had never quite seen on an alien face before. It was not anger, it was not fear. It was a look that said his understanding of the situation had developed a problem it could not resolve. "You should not be standing," he said. "And yet," I said. He told me he had read the Earth file. He said his military analysts had flagged humanity as biologically unimpressive. No natural armor, no venom, no bioluminescent warning displays. Average muscle density below many spacefaring species. He said the file concluded that humans compensated through technology and numbers, and that individually, a human presented minimal threat. "Your analysts were looking at the wrong data," I said. He charged. 4 arms, 220 kilograms of crystalline armor, moving with the speed of something that had never lost a fight it entered. I did not try to match his strength. I never try to match strength when I do not have it. I moved instead, sideways, and forward, and low, and into angles that his 4-armed model of combat had not been built to anticipate. Earth had given me opponents over the years, creatures that outweighed me, people who trained their whole lives in systems I had never seen. You learn to use what you have. You learn that the most dangerous thing is not the biggest thing. The most dangerous thing is the thing that keeps getting back up. He stopped after a while, not from injury, from a place past frustration, into something I can only describe as a fundamental inability to continue. His threat model had no space for an opponent who, when knocked down, simply stood back up and continued, as though falling was a temporary inconvenience and not a signal to stop. "What are you?" he asked. I secured his upper arms with restraints and checked my side, where something had caught me during the engagement and left a long red mark through the weave. 12 stitches, I estimated, maybe 14. "Human," I said. "From Earth." I looked up at him. "Sorry we took so long to get here. The GU waited until they were desperate before they made the call." He did not say anything after that. We had the station fully secured within the next hour. 587 hostages recovered alive. 13 had been injured before our arrival, and Bonesaw had set up a field clinic in the sealed compartment, treating beings of 6 different species with a combination of the station's medical supplies and what she had brought in her kit, improvising where the species-specific treatments were absent, which was often, and managing anyway, which was always. Ambassador Chirithsek arrived 3 hours later with a GU response team. He stepped through the airlock and stopped. His compound eyes moved slowly across the room. The clinic, the restrained breath, the 12 of us sitting against the wall eating ration packs and drinking water from our canteens. He was still for a long moment. "You are all present," he said finally. "All 12, I confirmed. "The medical report from our scanners indicates several of your team sustained injuries during the operation. Gecko has a cracked rib. Tanaka lost a tooth on the ceiling during the first gravity spike. Reyes has a fragment wound to the shoulder, cleaned and dressed. I have some bruising and a cut that needs stitches." I met his compound eyes. "We're fine, Ambassador. Everyone is walking." Chirithsek was quiet for a long time. Then he said, very carefully, "When the Galactic Union first catalogued Earth, the environmental report generated significant concern. Your world was classified as a hazardous zone, unsuitable for colonization or extended contact." He paused. "It was viewed as a warning." "I know," I said. "We did not consider," he continued slowly, "what living in such a place might produce." I picked up my ration pack and took a bite. "Most people don't," I said, "until they need to." He left to begin the diplomatic process of dealing with the Vreth Compact. My squad finished their food. Bonesaw checked everyone's injuries one more time, the way she always did after an operation, methodical and thorough, and slightly irritating in the best possible way. Gecko was asleep against the wall within minutes, his body simply deciding it had earned the rest and taking it without asking permission. Tanaka was writing something in her small notebook, as she always was. I sat and looked out through the one remaining intact observation dome at the gas giant below us, massive and orange and completely indifferent to everything that had just happened inside the small glass and coral station orbiting it. Bands of cloud moved across its surface in long, slow patterns that had been turning for longer than our planet had existed. I thought about what Chirithsek had said, a warning. That was what they had seen when they looked at Earth, a red flag in a database, a world to avoid. They had looked at the predators and the pathogens and the crushing weather and the difficult gravity, and concluded, nothing good could come from there. They built walls around the category and moved on. They never asked what happened to the things that stayed. We stayed. We did not have a choice, in the beginning. None of us choose the world we are born onto. But we stayed generation after generation, and every generation learned something from the world, trying its best to remove us from it. We learned how to fall and get up. We learned how to breathe bad air and walk through it. We learned how to take a hit and calculate the damage and decide whether the damage was enough to stop us, which it usually was not. We learned to work together, in the way that things learn to work together when the alternative is not surviving, which is a better teacher than any training program. The galaxy had looked at Earth and seen a graveyard. What they missed was what graveyards teach the things that live beside them. I closed my notebook. I had been writing too, without noticing, and looked around at my squad in the dim light of the damaged station. 12 people from the most hostile rock in this sector of the galaxy, sitting quietly after a fight, eating ration bars, falling asleep against walls, writing in notebooks, doing what people do when the hard part is over and it is time to simply be alive for a while. The GU called us expendable. They meant it as an apology, I think, a way of saying they knew they were asking too much. They did not understand that we were the wrong people to apologize to for that word. Expendable was what Earth had made us feel every single day, and we had answered it every single day by being here anyway, still here, always here. We were humans. We came from a world that never made it easy, and when the rest of the galaxy finally ran out of options and swallowed its pride and called us, we showed up. We always show up. That is, in the end, the only thing the death world ever really taught us. Not to be stronger than everything else, not to be fearless or unbreakable or immune to pain. Just this: when it gets hard, you do not stop. You find your footing. You stand back up. You keep going. The gas giant turned slowly below us, patient and enormous and old. Somewhere out there, the distress signals of other stations, other species, other impossible situations were already forming, waiting to be sent. I finished my water, leaned my head back against the wall, and closed my eyes. We would be ready.